if you're in a state where hurricanes often strike, a vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now.
By moving to clean energy economy.
Apple plans to start making the iPhone 14 in India.
We've got a whole lot today, but what else is new? President Biden saying if you're preparing for a hurricane, as in Florida, the best thing you could do is to get vaccinated. Unless you're a woman, of course. Big story coming out of that. That was also a clip from a year ago, so don't pay any mind to the timeliness of that. Also, the Russian pipeline that got blowed up. Don't know what happened there. Swiss elections. Why are we talking about that? Oh, because it's important. iPhones getting made not in China anymore, and a lot more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. My name is Jobob. Thanks so much for tuning in. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
2, 1.
Here we go!
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually their name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in on today. It is September 28th, the year of our Lord 2022. Just to reiterate, just to re-preface this, that Joe Biden clip that you saw at the beginning where he said the best thing you can do in a hurricane is to get vaccinated. That was from, I believe, last year's hurricane season, but it was like a never forget this moment. I don't want anybody to take that out of context. And they're saying this happened now. Even though it did happen, by the way, it did happen. So I wanted to play that because one, the hurricane going to Florida, which is supposed to make landfall like right now. We'll update you on that if anything happens there. But also big story coming out of the Washington Post, of all people, talking about the COVID shots and how they affected women. Don't miss that. But before that, I want to get to this because this is getting more and more interesting as the time goes on. This whole year really has been made up of Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. Then Ukraine obviously fighting back. How much money are we sending them? Is anybody else helping? Are we the only ones helping? All of that back and forth. Then Ukraine starts to take places back. Now all of a sudden Putin's backed into a corner and he's doing all of these crazy things, enlisting 300,000 people who have no military training. And we get a great clip for that. Holding this fake election on the eastern side of Ukraine that is heavily occupied by Russians. That's fascinating. We also have a video on that, but also the pipeline battles. So just to briefly kind of reset this idea of pipelines, Russia, actually, I read this fascinating piece yesterday about Putin's whole rise to power and stabilization of the country of Russia. It seems like, and again, I'm no Russian historian here, but it seems like Putin becoming as popular as he is within Russia was kind of luck. When the Soviet Union fell and kind of chaos going on in Russia, the former KGB officer, and I'm summarizing this thing that I read last night, comes to power, and around the same time that Putin comes to power, the price of oil and the price of natural gas starts going up. And therefore, things are starting to go well in Russia because it is more or less an autocracy. And because things are going well, because the global price of gas and natural gas and energy as a whole is going up, Putin looks like he's doing a great job, which is why some people would explain that he had a bunch of support throughout the last, 2 decades that he's been in power. But the energy, obviously, in Russia needs to go to other places. In order to export energy, you need pipelines. We've talked about the Nord Stream pipeline and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Those are pipelines of natural gas from Russia. I'm not sure if they're based in Moscow, St. Peter. I don't know where they come from in Russia, but they go through the better part of Europe into Germany, where there's a bunch of refineries there that refine, I believe you refine natural gas. I don't know anything about natural gas, but so you refine natural gas and find oil as a whole. So those pipelines go through all of Europe into Germany. Obviously, right now, there's a huge pushback against using Russian oil. And before any of this happened, there was a second pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that the last 3 presidents before President Biden were hell-bent on not allowing to happen. they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that Putin and Russia were not people that we wanted to have this amount of power over the European Union. So George W. Bush stopped the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Obama continued to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and they did so by sanctions, by the way. The company that was building the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, they said, you ain't doing business anywhere if you complete this thing. So that's how they stopped it. Then Donald Trump came in and agreed with George Bush and Obama and stopped the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And then Joe Biden came in and just kind of let it happen. Didn't re-up the sanctions. I think he let the sanctions expire. All of that being said, one of the pipelines, I believe the original Nord Stream pipeline, got blown up by somebody. Somebody damaged, sabotaged, probably. Now, I'm not an absolutist on really anything. I don't tend to have the opinion of this absolutely happened. But there's a lot of speculation. First of all, it doesn't seem like it's natural. There's a huge bubble popping up to indicate that I don't think this is just a small leak. This is a big old leak in one of these pipelines that go from Russia to Germany. Now, there's several different theories out there. I'm going to play a clip from Tucker Carlson last night. He's got a couple ideas. But let me just preface what he says, and this kind of makes some sense. Again, I'm not into this whole conspiracy world really all that much. I try to make sense of things, but at the same time be reasonable and leave room for, I don't know, maybe this other variable exists that I don't know about. But one, either the Russians did it or Russian allies did it. Lukashenko in Belarus, Putin in Russia. Either they did it, which doesn't really make any sense because people still buying Russian oil still have to pay Russia, which is funding their war against Ukraine. So that wouldn't make any sense to cut themselves off from any money that they'd be using to fight Putin's battles, so that doesn't really make sense. Or two, somebody else against Russia, which would inherently then be an American ally, blew up the pipeline. And just so you know, nothing happens militarily, at least around the world, at least to this level, without people letting the United States know and probably getting the okay. So that being said, that kind of sets up the premise for Tucker Carlson saying that Biden maybe knew about it, and what happens if the Biden administration maybe didn't blow it up themselves, but also possibly okayed it happening. Because again, there's really only two situations. Either Russians or Russian allies blew it up, which doesn't make any sense, or Americans or American allies blew it up, which I don't know the justification of it entirely. I haven't dug super into this, but again, other countries don't act without telling us for obvious reasons. I'm going to play this clip from Tucker Carlson last night. Some of it is a little tough to piece together just because he's talking about different pipelines going in different places, but I tried to get the most condensed version of this as possible. Anyways, watch this from Tucker last night. Oh, also, by the way, if you haven't already, click the little like button down here or the reaction button wherever you're watching at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Getter. Hello, Getter. Week 2 of streaming on the Getter platform. Also, the little share button or the repost button or the retweet button, whatever you feel is appropriate, really, really does help us out. Continue this ball rolling each and every morning here on Daily Color Life. Watch this clip from Tucker and we'll discuss on the other side.
Natural gas from Norway through Denmark to Poland and other countries nearby. And it's likely to do very well since now it has less competition.
Okay, sorry, that was, got that clip mixed up. Bottom line, Tucker's talking about the green energy people having their own interests in blowing up this pipeline. Listen to him again one more time. This is him talking and then playing a big, long clip from KJP. Watch this.
Here's the president's publicist noting that the destruction of yet another energy pipeline is yet another opportunity for you to buy an electric car.
As you all know, these pipelines weren't pumping gas into Europe at this time. NS2 was never operational, as you guys know. NS1 has not been operational for weeks because Putin has weaponized energy, and we have said this many times before. This just drives home the importance of our efforts to work together to get alternative gas supplies to Europe and to support efforts to reduce gas consumption and accelerate.
Yeah, so that's the theory. Who knows? We'll let this kind of play out, but that's at least setting up what's going on. There's a pipeline that takes a lot of natural gas from Russia to Europe, and that is went kablooey. I think they think it's going to be several weeks, if not several months, before that gets back on track. I wanted to move to this because we're continuing talking about Russia, and then I promise you we'll talk about the Washington Post article about the COVID shots for women. But watch this. Okay, so this is interesting. So we all know that Putin has sent 300,000 troops, or at least calling them up to mobilize them to go fight in Ukraine. This is a video that has this guy in a tank unit talking about what a bunch of the news media outlets have been talking about of, hey, they're not even training these people. They're just sending them in as cannon fodder effectively to go get killed in Ukraine, which again sounds coarse and terrible, but that's just what the reality is. Russia is known for sending bodies at things because they have them until they win. This seems to be no different. This guy obviously speaking Russian. I can't imagine most of you speak Russian, but I will read the subtitles as well as let you watch the video, especially if you're just listening to this on the podcast. If you don't have it, by the way, if you haven't grabbed the podcast, we're on all of your podcast outlets, so you can find Daily Caller Live with yours truly on any of those podcast outlets if you want to listen while you're driving, mowing the lawn, cleaning the pool, whatever it is you want to do. Anyways, listen to this. This is fascinating.
Всем привет, на связи первый танковый полк.
Everyone, this is the first tank regime. We're officially being told there's no training. We're just being sent to the combat zone. The regiment commanders have officially confirmed this information. On the 29th, we will be sent to Kherson. Kherson, by the way, is where a bunch of the heavy fighting has happened in Ukraine. Therefore, think to yourself and decide for yourself what to do with this going forward. I think he's talking about maybe just jumping ship. No retraining, he says, no shooting, no theoretical preparation, nothing. Yeah, that was it. Oh, we'll play this clip in just a quick second. Bottom line here is they're just sending people. Now, there are huge protests going on throughout Russia, which takes some serious guts. There's a line 10 miles long at the Russian-Jordanian border of people trying to leave because they don't want to be part of the 300,000 people that get called to go fight in the military and have no training, no mental preparation, no retraining on any of that. I would imagine these guys are, former military or reservists. But at the same time, nothing. Just, hey, you're sitting on your couch one day watching, I don't know, whatever Russians watch. And the next day, literally the next day, you're off in the heaviest fighting areas of a war that you don't understand why you're fighting in. Whew, boy, interesting. On the other side of that announcement that Putin made is he also talked about, well, we're going to hold a vote in some of the more eastern parts of Ukraine that are Russian-held and heavily populated by Russians and their families. We're going to hold a vote there. This is a video clip of somebody counting the votes and tallying up the votes. I believe, now just so you know, this is all, I found these from Twitter. These videos are kind of hard to find. I don't have a huge team that verifies everything, so I can't speak to the 100% validity of this. But this seems to be, it appears to be a video of somebody counting the votes in that area. Again, it's in Russian, so we don't really know what they're saying.
Ну вот председатель комиссии Наталья Шанани сейчас демонстрирует всем и журналистам,
but it seems like, yeah, she's counting them from the back and putting them as yes votes. Everybody voting to join Russia.
Мне кажется, ей сейчас не позавидуешь, потому что слово «да» она будет произносить еще очень много раз. Если мы посмотрим стопки, где ответ «да», они гораздо больше, но есть также...
Seems to be it. Oh boy. Again, we'll keep you updated on anything that happens there. If anything moves we'll bring it to you. But that whole Russian situation in Ukraine, the situation that Putin has put himself into, is freaking fascinating. I want to get to this. All right, here we go. Here it is. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this story already, but this is from the Washington Post. The article headline was, "Many women complained that after getting the COVID shot, it affected their menstrual cycle." And the Washington Post headline said, "A new study suggests that they were right." Interesting. Not long after the rollout of coronavirus vaccines last year, women around the country began posting on social media what they believed was a strange side effect: changes to their periods. Now, remember, at the time, if you posted anything hesitant about the COVID shot on any of your social media platforms, it was flagged, it was taken down, you were suspended. A lot of things happened to you that shouldn't have, probably. But just as is a lot of these quote-unquote conspiracy theories, things turned out to be more true than not. Saw this with the Hunter Biden laptop. We saw this with a lot of the COVID stuff, not just this, but a lot of the COVID stuff, in that, you get the shot, you won't be able to spread it to grandma. You're protecting everyone, when that turned out to be not true. And it turned out that they knew it at the time. Dr. Fauci, yet again, lying about that. But honestly, I'm still curious about how social media handles this sort of stuff. I honestly was skeptical at putting this story kind of in the headline. Like, hey, do we talk about this on social media still? Is this going to get us like booted off, deplatformed, all of that sort of stuff? I mean, because it's in the Washington Post. It's not like we're talking about some crazy right-wing conspiracist blogger. We like to keep things as fair as possible on this show. But even still, I had the hesitation of, how much do we go into this? Because of how censored people got, how shadow banned people got, how much they got kicked off of social media for saying things half this. But again, the Washington Post now saying what a lot of people have been saying for years now. Years? A year and a half now. The Washington Post goes on and says, now new research shows that many of their complaints were valid. A study of nearly 20,000 people around the world. All right, pause. The story's talking about women. I'm curious. Well, let me read on. They say people, but do they mean women? Is that what they're talking about? Or is this one of these weird, like, science article, but we're going to go ahead and say that everyone can be a woman and just call all of these 20,000 people people? I might be proven wrong in the next sentence here. A study of nearly 20,000 people around the world shows that getting vaccinated against COVID can change the timing of the menstrual cycle. Vaccinated people experience, on average, about a 1-day delay in getting their periods compared to those who hadn't been vaccinated. So, before I go on, there's another paragraph here that I want to read. But let's just remember that this is the very, very beginning of finding different side effects and different things that happen. This seems to be the timing of a woman's menstrual cycle after getting the COVID shot, and finding out that, yeah, there's some issues with the timing of that, seems like a very, very surfacey level thing. Not necessarily going in deep as to why that happened, because I'm sure that'll be found out later. But all of this stuff is very, very surface level, and it's only a matter of time until people dig deeper than that. The data showed that vaccinated people got their periods 0.7 days late on average after the first dose of the vaccine. However, people who received 2 vaccinations within 1 menstrual cycle experienced greater disruptions. Again, this worries me a lot, because this is a very, very tangibly understood finding. There is nothing that in this article, at least, or in this study, because again, we're very, very early on to this, into the long-term effects of this stuff. And again, I'm not as conspiratorial as I think a lot of you would like me to be, but I don't know, very, very early on, we're still talking about surfacey level stuff. Like, hey, my hands started turning green. Like, okay, well, out of 20,000 people, the majority of people's hands started turning green. Okay, well, why is it turning green is the problem. That's the big problem that I have. We have to dig into why any of this is happening and how that's going to affect things long term. Just a thought. In this group of people who got both doses within one menstrual cycle, the average increase of cycle length was 4 days, and 13% experienced a delay of 8 days or more. Cycle length is different than delays, I think. So, okay, I'm not a woman. I don't get these. By get these, I mean I understand them to the extent that I have, but I don't have first world experience of a menstrual cycle here. Let me read that again. In this day, the average increase in cycle length was 4 days, and 13% experienced a delay of 8 days or more, compared with 5% in the control group. So that's interesting. I'm going to leave it there and not go into all of the nitty-gritty kind of data stuff. But again, I've said it, I don't know what, twice already, but I'm going to reiterate it. The problem I have with this sort of stuff, and it's not a problem with the data, but the concern that I have is we're talking very, very surfacey level. Physical reactions to any sort of medicine, internal body work is the very, very first step in understanding what's going on beneath. We've got a tip of an iceberg here in this sort of study, and I think over the next couple months and couple years, then it's going to get really, really, really interesting. Got an interesting comment here. This is all BS. The vaccine is no different than the flu vaccine. The COVID vaccine keeps you out of the hospital and the morgue. Politicizing COVID is criminal. Interesting. Okay. Again, I'm not making any claims at all here. I'm not pushing any sort of conspiracy theory that you shouldn't get the COVID shot, because if you want to, go ahead. I don't care. I've said that many times. But at the same time, calling something, again, from the Washington Post, not a right-leaning conspiratorial news outlet, all BS, and saying that it's no different. I'm not sure where you get that commentary, but we'll see how it all kind of pans out. Well, want to hear something more concerning? And this is concerning on a bigger cultural level, not necessarily from a geopolitical level, an internal political level, but an American culture level. I thought this was fascinating. And, oh, shoot, there's something else. Dang it, do I want to talk about this? Nah, we'll leave that for tomorrow. Joe Biden had another thing that I have in my notes here that I want to talk about, but we'll leave this here. Because I do think this is important on a cultural level, and I would like some input in the comment section here what you think about this. So the new iPhone 14 came out. This is not an advertisement. I'm not getting paid to say this, but I'm just telling you because it's a news story. The iPhone 14 came out, I believe, last week, and there were lines wrapped around the Apple Store buildings around the country, around the world, really, to get the new piece of hardware that would allow you to say mean things on the internet about people you've never met. But according to a latest survey regarding the annual iPhone and personal finance, the platform Wallet Hub said that 36% of surveyed adults are planning to get the latest model shortly after it comes out. So 36%, a third of Americans, are planning to upgrade to the new iPhone pretty much immediately. When the first iPhone came out, there was a lot of upgrades. Since the iPhone 11, which is what I have and my wife has, since the iPhone 11, I'm not entirely sure how much better things are. I haven't seen a drastic difference between all right, just not that you want to know about my iPhone history. I had an iPhone like 6, and was like way, 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 way behind because I'm cheap and thrifty and very, very frugal. I finally upgraded to an iPhone 11 when the 13 came out, which made my iPhone 11 much, much cheaper. And now there's 14. I don't see a difference between the iPhone that I have and the next two generations. I see a massive difference between my original iPhone 6 and my iPhone 11. That difference is gargantuan. It is a huge, huge leap forward. But there's really not that much in this. What I'm saying here is I don't know why a third of Americans are clamoring to get this brand new iPhone that probably does the same thing as your current iPhone, but maybe a little tiny bit better. But this is the more concerning thing culturally, that of those surveyed, 21% of adult Americans said that the new iPhone is worth going into debt for. I don't know what to do with that culturally. 1 out of 5 Americans say that the iPhone, getting a new phone that is marginally better than the phone that you probably already have, is worth going into debt for. Minus our mortgage, I can't remember the last time my wife and I were in debt, like at all, like had a dollar amount below the red line. Again, minus our home mortgage, which is a different thing, and even Dave Ramsey doesn't consider that debt. But people who have $0 in the bank account are going to go out and get the new iPhone. At least 1 out of 5, a fifth of people who are going to go get that new iPhone think that it's okay to go into financial debt to get a phone. What does that say about our culture? Now, just so you know, somebody here is right. I tend to be pretty skeptical about the current financial situation in the United States, as I think a lot of people are. But at the same time, there are people lined up around the block to get this new iPhone, and maybe, I don't actually have any verifiable data to back this up except for this survey, and maybe 20% of the people in that line are going below the red line of the income that they have and the savings that they have in order to get that phone. One of us is right. Either everything is going to be totally fine and the economy is just going to be humming along as normal, or there is a huge, massive, major correction coming to us. I tend to be in the latter half. I think there's a big old correction. There's been a big story that I haven't touched on because I don't know. I think blaming the president of the United States or giving them credit when the stock market is up and down is it's like maybe like 5% their fault. There's just other factors going on. And also I think that we've screwed ourselves by putting ourselves in a position to which the president has any power on manipulating the stock market. But nevertheless, there was this big story that I didn't talk about really, that I think the market has lost $7.5 trillion since Joe Biden has taken office, which is a lot of money. But again, I don't know. That's not really a sandbox I like to play in all that often. But I don't know. I just think this whole thing, the whole idea of going into debt is fascinating. National credit card debt jumped from $841 billion in 2021 to $887 billion now, according to LendingTree. So we're taking on more debt at a time when inflation is really high, which, okay, for being honest and being fair, is a good time to take on debt. It's better to owe somebody back money that's worth less than when you borrowed it, which is, part of the reason why you could make the argument that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury really, really want inflation to go up, because the debt that Americans owe on their bonds shrinks. Right? Does that make sense? If you owe money to somebody that is worth less if I owe you $100 today, I owe you $100 today right now, and in 10 years I pay you back that $100 that I owed you, that $100 is very, very different. The higher inflation goes, the less that $100 is worth. And I could have bought, I don't know, let's just say, what can you buy with $100? $100 art, like a decent camping barbecue. I bought a decent camping bar. I have that decent camping barbecue now for the $100 that you owed me. And in 10 years, I still have that camping barbecue, but I owe you $100 back, which now, given high inflation, I can only buy a Big Mac with. There's a difference, right? There's a huge difference with the debt that you owe now versus the inflationary debt that you owe in the future. There's a lot of argument to be made that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve aren't opposed to a high inflation amount, because that means the dollars that Americans owe, which were $32 trillion in debt or something like that, becomes less of a financial burden as inflation goes up. It's not good for the consumer. It's not good for businesses. It's not good for your savings, but it is good for a national debt standpoint. I wasn't planning on talking about this at all. Bottom line here is a fifth of Americans, 1 out of 5 Americans, think buying the new iPhone that doesn't do anything that your old iPhone could do is worth going into debt for. Anyways, I'm going to stop rambling. I feel like I'm getting into the rambling phase of this show, so we're just going to cut it off here. There's some stuff with these Swiss elections that I want to talk about tomorrow. Also, there is a pretty funny White House dietary health food security bill that Joe Biden is pushing. And I don't know, they're two contradicting things, so I think they're funny. I really didn't get to really any of the comments that I wanted to get on here, but I did save this one from earlier. Shifra, maybe? I'm not sure. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Maybe that's your last name. Maybe your first name is Lynn Morgan, but says, love your show. So glad I live in the U.S. I know it sucks with all the polarization we have here every day, but I'm reminded how lucky we are to live in the United States of America. Amen. God bless America. We'll end it on that. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Just type in JOBOB. You'll be able to find me at Jobob on the Instagram machine. Just type in JOBOB pretty much everywhere else. Also on Getter. We're streaming on Getter for the second week. Hello, people on Getter. Appreciate you tuning in. Busy October coming up this October. Let's see. If you live in Southern California, I will be in Norco, California, doing a comedy show, I believe, October 7th. I'm going to be in Austin October 12th with an event in Newport Beach. Also, if you live in Southern California, on the 15th of October. Follow me on the internet to find that if you're in that area and want to come hang out. Also in, I believe, North Dakota on the 26th of October in Brookings. Either North Dakota or South Dakota. I'm sorry. I think it's South Dakota. And I think Minnesota later on in the month. So anyways, come and hang out. I would love to meet y'all smiling faces in person if you happen to be in any of those areas. And we'll keep on keeping on. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. God bless America.